Watching TVC News. The Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, Akintunde Sawyer, said over 6,000 students from the University of Lagos have applied for the government's interest-free student loan scheme. Speaking during an official visit to the institution, Mr. Sawyer commended the university of its proactive support and ethical administration of the program, which aims to reduce students' dropouts due to financial hardship. He noted that while 6,000 had applied, around 31,000 eligible students at UNILAG were yet to access the loan, citing the need for more awareness and education to overcome cultural resistance to loans. Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, Akintunde Sawyer, joins me on the news this hour. Thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
All right, so good morning. So UNILAG, 6,000 students, that's quite a huge number. What did what did NELFUND do to get this huge number at this time?
Okay, so look, I'd like to sit here and say that it was all NELFUND, but actually this is a partnership. This is the result of very effective collaboration with the authorities at the University of Lagos, ably led by the Vice Chancellor, Professor Ogunshola. What we did was make sure that the management were fully aware of what the requirements were for the loan and enthuse them to go and enthuse their students to apply. So, you know, this success is a partnership. It's actually the result of good collaboration.
So while we have 6,000 people that have accessed these loans, it's a far cry from the remaining number of 31,000 that have refused to access the loan. Why is this at this time? Why do people have such a particular mindset about loans? Okay,
so I probably wouldn't use the word refused because they haven't actually refused yet. But let me put it into some context. Okay. We recognize that, you know, in 13 months, people need to sort of be able to think very carefully about what they're doing in terms of taking on a loan. I'll tell you there are 31,000 eligible students at the University of Lagos. 6,000 of them, yes, have indeed taken up the loan. For some people, they don't need the loan. If you don't need the loan, don't take the loan. However, keep an eye on what's going on because people's circumstances change all the time. And it's important for people to recognize that the loan scheme is there in case they need it. The President has been very clear in his vision to ensure that people are not really going to be able to drop out from school for financial reasons. So we're there to help those who may need us. And we're certainly not expecting that all 31,000 will take it up. The other thing, of course, is that there are a good number of students who perhaps feel that they can get through their education without having to take a loan. Again, we have to be respectful of that. Okay. And, you know, for some people, they simply don't like the idea of a loan. Having said that, this is a loan with a difference. Okay? So first of all, it's interest-free. The second thing I should say is that the terms are really not onerous at all. People who take the loan don't have to pay it back or start paying it back until 2 years after they've completed their NYSC and only if they have a job. And even in that instance, it's the employer that has an obligation to go to our database to check whether the person has a loan or not and then begin to deduct the 10%. So as you can see, it's really the terms for the students or for the loanees is really very soft.
So 10% deduction on a monthly basis 2 years after school?
2 years after National Youth Service Corps completion.
Yes.
So not after school. 2 years,
after NYSC.
2 years after NYSC.
1 year after the NYSC scheme itself?
No.
Okay,
two full years, two complete years, yeah,
after the NYSC scheme.
Absolutely. Two complete years after the NYSC scheme is when there's an obligation for the loan to be paid back, even if they have a job. So that it really allows people to settle in and to get some savings put together. But even at that 2 year point, as I said, it's only if they have a job that the 10% deduction comes from the employer, and the employer is the one that's obliged to make those deductions. If they lose that job for any reason during that period, the payments stop.
And it's interest-free?
Completely interest-free. Okay,
so I want to hear from you. How many students generally in Nigeria have accessed this loan so far?
Okay, so I can tell you that something like 646,000 students have accessed our portal and provided us with their details. 609,000 students in 13 months have applied for the loan. So those are what the numbers look like at the moment in 13 months. I can give you some disbursement figures if you want them, but that speaks to your question.
No, go on.
Okay, so so far we've paid out 38 billion naira in institutional fees, and I'll qualify that. When students apply for this loan, we pay direct to their institutions the fees that are owed by them to that institution for them to be able to access classes. We've paid 38 billion naira so far for that as that tranche of payment for institutions receiving it directly. We've paid 34 billion naira in upkeep. Upkeep is the monthly stipend that we pay to students for the period of the session. So they get 20,000 naira every month. That, based on the number of students that we've paid so far, who have benefited so far, comes to 34 billion. So the total disbursement to today, is 72 billion naira that we've actually paid out to students as upkeep and to institutions as institutional fees. I can also tell you that we've had 366,000 beneficiaries so far. So 366,000 Nigerians who are in tertiary institutions owned by the state governments or the federal government are benefiting directly from this loan. Either we've paid their fees or we've paid them, well, either we've paid their fees or we've paid them both upkeep and fees, because we never pay upkeep on its own. And finally, I'd just like to say that we've paid 206 institutions in Nigeria to date.
Less private universities, right?
Less private tertiary institutions, yes. So the numbers I've just quoted you now are completely around state government and federal government owned tertiary institutions, universities, polytechnics, colleges of education.
Will there be a time when we'll see NELFUND supporting those who are going for master's degree or higher degrees?
So, you know, actually the law allows us to be able to pay or to give loans, if you like, for those who want to further their education beyond their first degrees. However, you know, nobody has a finite amount of funds. And the President's vision is that we at least give those who are coming out of secondary school, going into tertiary education, an opportunity to get on that first rung of the ladder. The other thing is that because we're also considering and paying loans for those who are already institutions, again, the vision of the President is that nobody should be allowed to drop out of school. Our job is to implement that vision. And so that's really the way it's working out at the moment. We'll get to, you know, a wider group or a wider audience as time goes on, but there's a group of Nigerians that need to be rescued.
So what's the vision of the NELFUND? How many students do you want to touch with this fund?
Well, you know, that's a really interesting question. This is a program that is here to stay. If you say how many students do we want to touch, we want to be able to touch millions of students over the years and decades ahead of us. You know, so there's a static population of students that we believe is somewhere between 1.8 to 2 million students in tertiary institutions as we speak. But to your question, how many students do we want to touch? You know, this is a revolving number. There are something like 400,000 students who graduate every year, 400,000 students who come in. We're in an ongoing program.
What about those in vocational schools?
Okay, so we haven't started that program yet, but we are now actively engaging with partners for that. Okay. I think the numbers there are in the tens of millions. What we want to do is be able to provide those in non-academic trades, if you like, or those who wish to get into non-academic trades, plumbing, carpentry, aircraft repair, underwater welding, mining, all those sorts of sort of handcraft, hand skill, technical vocations. We think that there are tons of people on the streets of Nigeria, millions of people idle, doing nothing, who are not academic or haven't had the chance to have grounded education to be able to take them to higher institutions, but who are extremely talented and who, if they're given a chance, can pick up skills that will be beneficial to them, beneficial to this developing country, and perhaps beneficial to other nations who want to come and invest here.
Managing Director and Chief Executive of the Nigerian NELFUND, Akintunde Soya, thank you so much for
Thank you for having me on your show.